Can I just say, we mustn't do it on the cheap like the East Coast mainline was done in the 1980s either. Steve, you know, I don't think you blame that one on us.
No comment, quite right. Listen, we literally have, I make it 4.5 minutes. It's determined to end this on time as well. I want one very brief question from somebody, the gentleman at the back of the room will do me very nicely over there. Thank you. Sorry.
Adam Palmer, Jacobs Consultancy. Given today's distribution networks work just in time and are reliant on road haulage, and given that HS2 will be built to a continental loading gauge, what is the panel's view on why a connection to HS1 is not mandatory when it would appear, and why has rail freight been excluded from this study when it would appear to offer the perfect solution to motorway congestion and maximising carbon reduction?
HS2 to HS1.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's something. But you have to be very quick here. I know you're quick before that again.
I agree entirely that the connection between HS1 and HS2 should be there, and that will be in my comments on the report that was released last week. And I think it can be done much more cheaply than they were suggesting. It was incredibly expensive because you have to have an extra tunnel all the way from Albert Common almost to St Pancras. I can't see why you can't have about a half-mile long link from the tunnel under Primrose Hill across to the St Pancras. You know, I suspect they made it expensive in order to make it not feasible. Freight on HS1 and HS2 may be overnight, but probably not during the day because of the whole thing about reducing capacity if you have different speed trains on there. But what HS2 would, of course, do is release capacity for more freight on the classic network, and I guess that certainly during the daytime anyway, that's where it would really go. But we also need more lines upgraded for freight, such as Felixstowe, Eton and Tonbridge and underway and Southampton to the West Midlands. Again, should have been done years ago. Why wasn't it? One has to ask both of the parties who've been in government recently, why they didn't do those things.
Yeah. Look forward, not back, please, Stephen.
Looking forward, in terms of rail freight, we need to make sure that national policy statements look for strategic rail freight interchanges so that we can move more around. We need to look at ensuring that freight operators who bring things in via ports have more security of cars into the network. And there are a number of things like that that need to be done. Being quick in terms of linkage between high speed 2 and high speed 1, yeah, absolutely that would be desirable. There may well be some practical issues, but if not, there are some very good ways of linking potential new Euston stations to King's Cross and King's Cross and Pancras. And so there are some fairly innovative ways that can be done quickly, and still you get some fairly substantial benefits.
Norman Baker.
You must have a connection, a rail connection between HS1 and HS2 passengers. People in Birmingham or Manchester have got a perfect right to be able to get to Brussels or Paris without changing in London and going on a mile-long travel later or whatever the government was suggesting. It's a completely nonsensical idea, so that's got to be connected up. We have to get away from this idea of always change in London. So the connection, there's a passenger connection rather than a freight connection, I think, because HS1 and HS2, I think, dominant the passenger routes because of the speed, and the existing network can be used for freight. We do far more on that. It's crazy the government spending, as I mentioned, over £1 billion for the A14 to lorries to pound along that road when the parallel railway line effectively in Felixstowe has been neglected. And in fact, the port owners themselves have put money into what improvements that have been there.
Chris, you have the last word on this.
Well, it was nothing to do with the fact that I'm the MP for Ipswich. A significant improvement. This genuinely was nothing to do with the fact that I'm the MP for Ipswich. And there's been a big decision from Network Rail on a direct cross-country connection, what's known as the Ipswich Core, from Felixstowe as part of the improvements. Indeed, simply, if it hadn't been for the snow, I would have gone to the Southampton to see the gauge clearance on the tunnel there, where, as part of our strategic network investment, hundreds of millions going into just these sorts of initiatives. But at the end of the day, you can soak up more of the freight capacity coming into the country. But whether you can get the volumes that would justify you not doing the A14 scheme, I think some of the people in my region might have big questions, some of the businesses would have big questions So the other question was really about the HS1, HS2 links, which I think is desirable, which is why we've asked HS2 to go back, HS2 Limited to go back and look at what they've said initially about the cost. I mean, it is a difficult one because it obviously does involve a lot of tunnelling, and tunnelling is one of the more expensive elements of building railways. And we would, have to ask just how many trains would be using it for passengers. And I think we've got some reluctance to generally look at bringing freight onto the high-speed network and creating conflict with the high-speed trains. It really kind of undermines the way in which you want to get the maximum out of the high-speed rail network for people who benefit from it.
We do have to stop. I'm sure you would join with me in thanking everybody on the panel here. And I want to leave the very last word to David Shipley from CSR.
Well, when we came up with the idea of a rail debate, everybody said we were mad. People said nobody'd turn up. People said the politicians wouldn't engage. People said it would take too much time up. I think you'll agree that it's been all of those things, and everybody turned up. I'd like to thank the panel for turning up. I'd like to thank my team for helping me to organise it. I'd like to thank David Lowry for signing the cheques. And I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, China South, for supporting us in this. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for coming here, taking up your time to enjoy a pleasant evening and have a safe journey home.